here to tell you about a project that I founded, constructed, and then ran in London. And it's a project which was run on a shoestring, which means on very little resource. It was a huge miracle that it happened. And it came from the conviction that we were missing something in the city. And that place, we could refer back to the village well, which was always a place for meeting people where you came to get water. But in the city, such places were often lacking. Like, where would we, in London, say, sit and meet people who live completely different lives from us, who think completely differently? And that was, something of a tangle, because London is a very busy, buzzy place. There's plenty of street life, if you like, in certain areas. And in these boom areas, there's a sense of a real city. But just down the road in another neighborhood, you'll find that it's McDonald's that is trying to be that village well, is trying to be the place where you would have your children's birthday parties, where you would go out for the evening. And that's a world that's quite flat, it's quite standardized, it's quite prepackaged. It's saying, you know who you know, and you follow the drill. We felt that it was really important to have other kinds of places in the city, places where you could share skills, places where there was some particularity, where you could make crazy stuff, where there was a kind of the confidence that got built around and curiosity around meeting people, such that you would grow to love strangers and look for more and more of that diversity. And for children, it was important to have a place that wasn't spongy, rubber-colored enclosures. They need places where they can invent their games. They need places where they can invent their city. And that's why it's such an honor to be in Reggio Emilia, where these ideas were founded and are now so famous throughout education. So in 2010, we had the great opportunity to try out our ideas, to make them real, by winning the Meanwhile London competition. And the only problem is faced with the reality of a large site, which we had for 5 years, how were we to make these kinds of paradise, these images we had of conviviality in the post-industrial city, in a place which was a place of deprivation, a place of fear, and a place of turf gang warfare? Well, we looked at the we looked into the future, and it looked quite hazy. But when we looked back into the history of architecture, we found a typology which was supported this kind of hybridity, this kind of diversity, and it was called the caravanserai. And each caravanserai was a place which had a kind of confident look and was a place of refuge in a hostile world. It was a place where, had a well for animals, where traders could get in the shade and trade, they could sleep, and the local population set up a hotel to host travelers with money, with trade. And we liked this robust architectural framework. We felt that it offered something that we needed for the temporary city, a place where, in fact, every caravanserai passing through made its own temporary city in the space. And the word caravanserai is a difficult word. It's the difficulty of saying caravanserai actually became one of the strengths of the project, because it forced us to tell the stories and to explain what we were doing to invite people to participate on this adventure. Caravan means the people who are coming, the animals, the trade. And sarai means in Turkish the palace or the palace fort, the place where everything can happen and people can meet each other and trade.
I'd actually walked past the caravanserai a number of times wondering what it was, and I think I remember Googling it. It was nice to see something different come to the area. It was something that, Canning Town hadn't seen before.
And there was music blaring out one time, so I passed in and had a look, and very nice agricultural, what's it called, caravanserai. It's lovely, mate, and just opened my eyes up because this is a very rough area.
We went to the shop and we heard music, and he started running. And I shouted out, "Please, can you just wait for me?" He was like, "I've got to find out where it is." And it was here. So we just came in and it was raining and we were just dancing all night.
It was this very rare chance to play with a piece of London and to experiment, because there is almost no experimentation going on in city making. We wanted this to be something which was radically open, where the community was anyone on the site.
I'm lucky to live around here, and I like to come here with my friends, and kind of play music. It's kind of like a little haven, a little oasis. It's a great place to kind of chill with the plants and stuff.
This is my church. This is where I'm the happiest, amongst the green stuff.
There's a lot of magic things in caravanserai. I think it's the feeling of a little family.
We thought, well, why don't we have like 10 saris and we have 100 square meters of covered space? Could we find a new material, bringing them into some translucent glass-reinforced plastic to create a fluid, highly decorated roofing material? And that was one of the fairy tales that came out of this project. We've kind of invented a new material which could change the way that factory sheds look in the future.
I had found out about a competition they were holding for kiosk space. I got my space and I spent that summer trading, first of all helping to build the kiosk as well, and add my personal touches to it. I was busy working in my kiosk and networking and liaising. My children were playing in the sand here or watering the plants.
It's a campfire feel, people sitting around playing some music.
This is like a mini United Nations of people. A perfect place to make friends, connections.
One needs these nexuses, these physical intersections, an intersection between the physical and the conceptual and the spiritual as well. You need these hotels or caravanserais or laboratories or these places where things can meet, and the caravanserai does that in its visionary way.
So we opened on a April Fool's Day, and I think in Italy you know this, that people make fish and pin them on the back of grown-ups. Well, such things are a wonderful way to open a project which was very adventurous and foolish in its own way. And one of the things we did is we made giant fish which we attached to bicycles and had a race around the site. Traditionally, in the East End, kings and queens, the pearly kings and queens, not the real ones, come to open projects. And we were very honoured. We had a pearly queen come to open the caravanserai. And she hitched up her skirt and got on the bike and joined in. It was a magic moment. And we needed these magic moments because this site was a big challenge. It had no water, no drainage. They'd buried the electrical connections. We never had electricity. There was actually no money, very little, just the stuff that we funded. And it's not the place to tell that story, but it was something which meant that we were always having to do things differently here. So first of all, we named the project in big, confident letters along the front of the site. And then we had a lot of discussions. We had a lot of themes and different groups coming together to think, well, what did this space need to be? What was the content of this new kind of social space? And we made a model which we could take around places and which people could play with and move things around. We made a plan eventually, which was very useful for getting licenses, for planning, for getting funding, for telling people all the different things that were on the site. And then we had to build, and we wanted to build simply with the things which we were donated. So we had a pile of bricks, and we tried to build some big domes. We were fortunate enough, because there'd been a lot of publicity around the project, to have volunteers who were quite passionate about the project, architecture students, unemployed people, just people who wanted to design, or people who wanted to build, or people who wanted to organize events. And these people always promoted the project to new volunteers, and so there was a kind of success within that scenario. So now I want to take you on a very lightning tour through the site, which started with the gates, which were something which had to, again, be confident, billboards, which were quite difficult to tell about all the events, and eventually we made our second gate. The gardening and the way that people could take on a bit of this garden and own it and cultivate it was a very important part of the setting. So there were people coming to water to tend, to bring their kids to play. And this idea of mixing a place to socialize with a playground doesn't always happen, and it's really important that children and adults can play together. There's places to escape from it all, and in a kind of busy city, you need these quiet moments. Everything could move, so when there were events, we could pick up these micro-allotments and trees and change the space. People would find their corner. There were lots of groups coming around to find out what vegetables really looked like, and eventually we found the drainage, and we were able to make toilets, which was amazing, and we made this kind of a discreet, accessible toilet with a baby change and a very romantic setting. The food that was grown was able to be cooked and eaten and served in the trailer, which allowed us to become a proper cafe. And the long table was able to host feasts for 100 people. The flying carpet theatre and the trading kiosks brought a little bit of colour to the site, which really helped to lift this very grey building site and became a sort of backdrop for bands. But the rain was still with us, and there were times when events had to be cancelled, and somehow we felt that we needed a big space. We needed a place to properly host people. So we set up an open call and a competition, and the idea was that you had to be a man and a woman, you had to be an engineer, and you had to be an architect. So these two skills and two genders came together. Flitched is a word in English which means that you have wood and steel coming together to make a stronger joint. And the idea was to take scrap material, timber, which was not deemed suitable for building, and somehow, like a magpie bird, put it together. So we gave a long list of materials that we did have on site, and you were only able to build your project with these materials. And it was a fantastic success. Here it is, finished in the shadow of the South Gate, and it had a kind of magical urban barn character and was able to host a lot of fantastic discussions and theatre. Then it was time to go, and we wanted to pick up the garden, take all the good things and the good relationships to other places. So we had an open call for something we called Parks on Wheels, and again gave people a list of materials that they could build with. And a lot of inventive things came out of that. There was a fantastic concertina garden which could go into the tube. There was a lot of vertical gardens which were taken on wheels to schoolyards and other places. So I feel that there needs to be caravanserais everywhere, and that this is a missing piece in the city infrastructure, which one could argue was just as valid as train stations or supermarkets or football grounds. A place where new concepts of sociability can be practiced, and a place where ordinary citizens can have a real impact on their world. Thank you.